Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I'm talking with George Mount from Stringfest Analytics, where he does a lot of analytics content creation and content design. So we're going to talk about how to spot an effective course. We're going to touch on building a portfolio and also just get his kind of insights on the analytics market in general. So George, how are you doing today?
Doing well, John David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's what 10 a.m. here in Greensboro. What time is it over there in Cleveland?
We're on Eastern as well.
Oh,
Another
okay.
dreary Cleveland day.
Yeah, it was just a little bit overcast here, but not complaining. So yeah, let's just intro you. So how you said you've been in the analytics space for 5 years, or is that just course creation?
Yeah, 5 is probably fair. So I started in corporate finance. Like a lot of people found that my Excel skills in particular were really lacking and holding me back. So I really focused on that. Just like, let me get better at automating things, analyzing data, using Excel in particular, because that's what finance people use a lot. Uh, and I've always enjoyed writing and teaching, so I figured, oh, I'll start a blog. That's a great way, to learn more Excel. So things just kind of snowballed from there. Got really more interested in analytics in general, other tools and technologies, and really started focusing on, how do I teach and train people so that they're not in that same situation, that they're in a job and feel totally limited by lack of knowledge of something like Excel, or they don't know how to take that next step in data analysis. So that's over the last I guess 5 years, give or take, maybe a couple more, have arrived here, where now I have a full-time business, Stringfest Analytics, really focusing on big scale asset and content creation for helping people and organizations work with data.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you said the word Excel because up until this point, I've had a strong Tableau bias, and I need to kind of, I love Tableau. I love the community. I'm very plugged in. I've been the Tableau user group leader in Greensboro for the past 2 years. But I mean, that's only a very specific part of the market. Like Power BI and Excel are a huge part of analytics. And especially with the organizations that I'm consulting with, a lot of them are just using Excel, and they're looking to stay within the Microsoft suite and then pivot into Power BI.
Yeah, I think Excel is kind of the gateway for a lot of people into data analytics. And unfortunately, there's often a tendency, especially in education, to denigrate that knowledge. Like, you're not really doing data if you're using Excel. And yeah, there are limitations, just like any tool. But I think an important part of teaching data is to look at this holistically and kind of see everything in a bigger context. That Excel is a valuable part of the analytics stack, and that there's a lot of knowledge. Data is data. When you're working with data, there's things that you kind of do regardless of the tool that you're using. So if you can kind of take that knowledge and help people pivot it into other technologies, you're going to be in a lot better spot than just saying, oh, you're nothing, you use Excel. So I use Excel, and even within Excel, I mean, think about the last 5 years or whatever. There's Power Query and Power Pivot and all this stuff. It's not your grandfather's Excel anymore. So we say a lot of these things about, oh, it can't work with big data, you can't reproduce things. Well, that's not really true anymore. So again, that just goes into helping people see what's possible and looking at the context of all these technologies.
Yeah, let me give a shout out to UNCG because so Professor Ratcliffe, the guy that I had, or professor I had for quantitative analytics, we basically used Excel as a gateway into like getting into data science and data analysis. I mean, there's a lot that you can do. We were building like optimization models. I mean, learning things like combining data sources. And it was a really great way to it was a great conduit to like actually seeing how analytics works in different business scenarios.
Exactly. Yeah. there's a great hands-on approach when you're working with Excel. I mean, in some ways, you're even more hands-on than, using R, Python or something, because you're really seeing exactly, cell by cell, how does this process work? I have to write the formula. I can't just call on a package that does it for me. So yeah, there's definitely a good pedagogical element to Excel, and it's kind of catapulted me into the business analytics world. But yeah, I mean, like all heroes, Excel has its weakness, right? So I admit that, and that's why I really look at it as a broader landscape of, I kind of like to say the analytics stack. The web developers have their stack. I think we do too in analytics. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the stack is a really interesting way of phrasing that. Because I'm kind of expanding my stack in that I'm learning Einstein Analytics right now, and also learning the Salesforce Tableau API integration. So that, because Tableau just got bought by Salesforce, so I'm sure there's a department somewhere that is just, full hands on deck trying to build out, as much sophistication within that integration there, because there's so many businesses that have, Salesforce, and they're generating all this data. So being able to, build a predictive model and then also visualize that data is huge. So what other pieces, or I guess tools, would you recommend building your stack around?
Yeah, so that's a good point too, in that, just thinking about the plethora of tools and technologies now. I mean, even 10 years ago, right? Data analytics and data science, they weren't really buzzwords. I mean, I graduated in 2010. I don't think there are any data science jobs on the market, and that's like the cool thing to go for as a grad now. So just looking at the plethora of tools and technologies really makes you have to think kind of holistically about, what should I be learning? And I think, if you're going in data analytics, which is really more of my thing, like I kind of dabble in the data science world, but I'm a little more expertise in data analytics. I mean, knowing spreadsheets is foundational. But, you also want to think about, how does this relate with databases? So I think there's kind of like a 3 or 4 horsemen kind of thing that you want to do. Learn your spreadsheets, learn a little bit about databases, which is basically SQL. Then some kind of a dashboard tool. And if you can learn just the basics of scripting and some kind of a data science language like R, Python, or something like that, I think if you can kind of just get the basics. And, I've always been kind of a dabbler and a generalist. So, I don't have like a real strong preference for R, Python, or Tableau or Power BI from a learner's perspective. I mean, me personally, I tend toward different ones there. But, when you're just learning, just pick one, learn about it, because, there are going to be a lot of jobs that you might know Tableau and they might want Power BI. But if you can kind of understand, like, where does this technology fit again in this analytics stack? Like, what are they going to be using it for? When would I use this? What kind of problems would draw the attention of Power BI? I think you'll be in a good spot, again, thinking in that kind of like holistic sense of these tools, rather than just focusing on like one of them in particular.
Oh, cool. Interesting. So this segue kind of ties back to, that analytics stack, and that I think it's a really good idea for you to build out a portfolio to showcase, the stack or the tools or what you can do. How would you recommend someone going about actually building out a portfolio so you can show up to an interview almost like a graphic designer and say, here's my CV, here's what I've worked on, here's why I made this, this decision, this is the form and the function, and things around that nature.
Yeah. So, excuse me. I think that, what is the statistic? 50 or 80% of data analyst time is spent, cleaning data. So if you're looking at a data analytics job, just get excited about that and show that you're excited about that. I think, I was kind of blindsided by that when I, came out of business school, and I just thought these data sets kind of grew on trees and came to you, and you could build
Hmm.
this super fun model off of it. It's messy, like it takes a lot of work. So, if you can find projects where it's like, okay, let me take you through this data cleaning process and try to open source that process as much as possible. Think about, like, what are you looking at? What are you thinking about when you're going through this process? Showing that you can get excited about it. Because, especially a lot of entry-level data analyst jobs, to most people, they don't look that exciting. You're just kind of like putting data together, you're cleaning it, you're reshaping data. And that sounds boring, but for a lot of us, like, okay, yeah, I see that. I get the purpose of that. So if you can really walk through that, and then again, showing that you kind of have that wisdom to, okay, well, if I'm going to be working with a bigger data set, okay, maybe I can put this in a database. If I want this to be a little more interactive, okay, I can use the database and then put it into a dashboard using Tableau or something like that. So again, like showing that you can really think through, what's the best tool for this context, kind of open sourcing your thought process to getting there. Just being really excited about that whole data wrangling thing, like showing that you're not afraid to get your hands dirty when you're working with data.
Yeah, I've actually got a really cool anecdote that popped up last night. I was at a networking event called Greater Than the Sum. It's kind of like an event for students and entrepreneurs and, like, I guess, social activists in Greensboro. And I ended up sitting with a couple of students from High Point University, and they were talking about how big they're into sports analytics. So they're like these huge fantasy football like fanatics. And he said that one of their friends actually built out a dashboard and was selling it to their other friends to help them make picks. I mean, I think that is a really cool example that you could show up to an interview and say, hey, look, I understand it's these three factors. I mean, I'm totally not a sports ball guy at all. I don't know anything about sports, but if the player has X, Y, and Z, then I give them this rating, and then this is the overall score, and this is like, how I'm kind of building a model for this is a good pick or no, this is a bad pick. I think examples like that where you're applying analytics to your everyday life. And we interviewed Fabio Alamini from Volvo Finance, and he was talking about how it would be really impressive to him, because he does quite a bit of hiring of analysts, if someone showed up to the interview and they said, oh yeah, I built a financial model for my own personal finances, and these are the things I look for. This is how I sculpt a budget. This is, the data points I'm visualizing. Like, I guess bringing it to the real world is a really cool idea.
Yeah, man, I like that a lot. And I think, we hear this kind of term of data literacy a lot, and usually it's applied more of inside a business that, okay, yeah, you can interpret a line chart and, a little bit about, data cleaning or something like that. But, if we think about literacy and kind of like the reading sense, I mean, the way that someone's literate is when they like to read for fun, right? They enjoy it. It's a way for them to make sense of the world, and they see it as a way to get creative. Um, so I think that's the same with data literacy. Once somebody's really truly data literate when they start to have fun with it, and they do start to do things like a sports dashboard or track their personal finances. So it's the same idea of, data literacy. It's just, you're using it as a way to make sense of the world around you. And yeah, for an employer, you want to find somebody like that because, okay, that means that they're going to keep learning. They're going to have fun with this. And, it's just part of how they see the world.
I've heard that word quite a bit, and I've never really had a specific conversation around that topic. But who is it? One of the kind of like higher up big wigs in Tableau stepped down from his position. I think his name's Ben Young, but don't quote me on that. That may not
Oh,
be the
Ben
right name.
Jones. Yeah.
Ben Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he built his whole new organization around data literacy, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So what is data literacy?
Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the principles are. Like, I don't know how you would uh, build an assessment tool, but I mean, my kind of know it when you see it heuristic is that when somebody's having fun with data, they're data literate. Just like when a kid's reading for fun, I would say that he's literate. same idea. When somebody's having fun working with data, they're data literate. Um, and there's probably a little more to it, like with somebody learning to read, they can have fun with reading and still not be totally set with grammar and punctuation and stuff like that. But that kernel's in there, and you just have to build it out, and that'll come with the right training. So I think, again, with data literacy, just bringing it to like showing it as a way to really have fun with things. I think in a professional context, seeing the power of being able to automate and, actually step back at the bigger picture. I mean, that's really why I got into data analytics. Is I was tired of just like updating reports manually, clicking delete column L and then copy paste values into A13
Mm,
every week. And there are all these
this is like a
mistakes. Like,
nightmare.
yeah, like I just didn't like it. So that's really how I got the number one reason I got into data analytics was just like, let me automate some of this stuff. So I think that's some element to data literacy. I mean, there's the whole like data analysis side of it too, but they're kind of inextricably linked, automation with data analytics. So I think that would be some element of, when a person can start to look at their processes and think, oh yeah, this could be automated. I mean, that would definitely be another tick to me of a data literate person.
Yeah. So, like the example from earlier on in this podcast episode, the student who built out a Tableau dashboard that he's selling to his friends so that they can get, the right pick in their fantasy football league. That's being data literate. It's almost like learning to ride a bike. Like, yeah, the training wheels are off, you're pedaling, you're actually functionally using data to get some kind of outcome.
Definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Um, so wait, what was that last topic that we wanted to talk about? Okay, this is kind of like the sweet spot, and this is like the question that I think you're uniquely situated to answer. And according to you earlier, before we started hit record, you've never been asked this question. So how can you spot good online analytics content, and what are kind of the indicators there?
Yeah, this is a great question because I do make a lot of I have some notes here. I do have a lot of courses. I've done a lot with content creation, but it's really something I've kind of thought about to myself, but I've never written any of it down. So here we go. Um, Again, going to this idea of dirty data and data cleaning, I think that a good course, sometimes it's hard to walk through that process
Hmm.
with the course. You want things to be tidy. It's just easier to teach things when you can kind of start with the data already clean. But I think, a good course is really going to walk you through kind of that end-to-end process of, like, how do I even get this data ready to analyze? Because that's a lot of what we do. I mean, I'm not saying 50 to 80% of the course should be data cleaning, but you should know that that's 50 to 80% of the process. So you should definitely highlight that. And again, that end-to-end idea. Um, let's see what else.
So I say I'm a little guilty in that all the courses I've created, it's a extremely clean data source. In my
It's
defense, though, in my consulting practice, like the data with the companies I'm working with actually isn't that dirty. So like what I've noticed, like I've worked with billion-dollar organizations, and they tend to have dirtier data sets than like the companies that are 150 million in revenue or less. Because like an example of this is like um, some of the e-commerce sites that I'm working with use Square, and that's pretty much a perfect data set. So it's like what was purchased, the category, the time of purchase, and then maybe we could tie it back to an email address, and then I guess having to tie back demographics data to an email address is cleaning up data a little bit, but you're right. I probably, as a content creator, should have more around here's what you're going to see and here's how you can clean up the data.
Yeah, and I mean, that's fair enough because a lot of the times you put that in there and people don't like it. They don't get it. You kind of have to live through it to really understand. I mean, I try to bottle up what it's like to be a data analyst and package it into a course as much as I can, but sometimes it just kind of falls flat. So I think that goes into another topic, which is, taking some risks and having some opinion with your courses. Like there's so many courses that are just kind of this dispassionate list of, here are all the keyboard shortcuts in Excel. Like, okay, I mean, I can look that up on a search engine. I don't need to do that.
Right.
So if you can have a course where, again, somebody's like giving you that mental model of what is it like to be a data analyst? When would I use this? Thinking outside the broader technical tools and thinking really about kind of like connecting the dots between what I actually do. So, if you're teaching a course about Excel, you know, talk about data workbook protection. Like, is it really worth password protecting a workbook? I mean, that's always one of those topics, but I think students should know that maybe it's not worth it. I mean, let them make their own decision. And I think that's another part of a good course, is really putting that student behind the wheel. Like, you're
Hmm.
really more of the guide, and you're really letting them kind of take the wheel as much as possible, showing them to actually like do the work themselves. So they're going to come out of the course with something that's kind of like, hey, I made that, like the old paint by numbers kind of thing, where, the student has some skin in the game as to how the course is going to end up, and trying to add some creative element of it. So, if you are going to have some kind of a drill or assessment, it's okay to make something more open-ended. I mean, it's harder to assess something that's kind of like, now create your own thing after what I've taught you. But, I think that's kind of the real world is not assessed by multiple choice questions. So as great as they are
Yeah.
to make sure that people have that base knowledge, again, you want to get into this idea of like the top of Bloom's taxonomy is create, right? So that's the highest aspiration of a learner, is they can make something. So I think
Mm.
really that's the best course, is when you can actually get people to start making something themselves. That's really when you've done a good course, and that's really hard to do in like a 2-hour video course. So like I see that it's not always something that you can do, but that should always be your goal, is to try to plant that seed of creation with your data literate students.
Well, that's an idea that I've been kind of kicking around for a while now. Um, so I was telling you before the podcast starts that I've been doing keyword research, and how to build an analytics portfolio is like a golden, excellent key term. Apparently, there are a lot of people searching for it, but there's not very much content. There's content around like Kaggle and how to build out a data science portfolio,
Uh-huh.
but in terms of an analytics portfolio, there's not that much content. So it's almost like I want to go back and give a meta commentary on the 10 courses I have out and say, hey, look, here is the dashboard that we built in my sales analytics course. Here's how you can take that structure and make it your own. Here's how you can come up with, other questions like, maybe the manager wants to understand, well, how many days does it take to close a deal? And can we segment that by industry? Because then we can really start to give some prioritization to our sales team of, hey, look, sales manager, if you're up against a deadline, you should target manufacturers because they have a third of the turnaround for a sales deal than, the military or the government. Like kind of getting into that more tactical, hands-on space. But I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss of like, I don't think I would be able to have that higher tier thinking if I didn't have all these consulting engagements where, I'm working with the
Yeah.
CFO or the CMO or the CSO, and I'm it's almost like you use the word crowdsourcing. It's almost like I feel like I'm crowdsourcing my content through the consulting engagements that I have, because it gives me like that mental model to kind of root down on.
That's true, and it is one of those things that you kind of have to live to get. But there's so many ways to get it. Just go online. Find the LinkedIn groups, go to the meetups. You're gonna start. It's like with any group of people. You're gonna start to talk and think and act like them if you spend
Mm-hmm.
enough time with them. Um, and if you can apply that, sure, maybe you are fresh out of school or whatever, and you haven't had the work experience. But I think, again, if you're a very data literate person, you can build a project that's, take something you like, movie ratings, you could make a cool project out of that. And if you can show, I mean, I've always been a proponent of, like really walking your audience through what you're thinking. Like, it's great to just kind of dump, hey, these are these really cool
Mhm.
workbooks that I've made. Like, that's great too. That's probably a huge asset with hiring. But I think especially when you're starting out, if you can kind of like show people through that process, and maybe it is like, let me just share my screen and post that to YouTube. That's a part of my portfolio. And I think for data analytics, trying to consolidate that all into a portfolio. I mean, I guess having your own website would be good. You could use GitHub Pages. It's a little bit more technical know-how, but I mean, Tableau, I will give them that like the Tableau public thing is
Yeah.
like, boom, that's your portfolio. Don't got to think about it. So yeah.
Yeah, shameless plug here. Subscribe, because on my YouTube channel, although these videos might come before this actually gets published, I'm building out some how to build a Tableau portfolio easy. I mean, Tableau Public is an extremely potent resource that's free to you,
Yeah.
and you can show up to these interviews. But getting back to what you were saying about that, like why, or that meta commentary, um, I think long form content like this is how you get to that why. Like Joe Rogan's podcast, like he has someone come on and they talk about their area of expertise for 3 hours. Like there's this recent scandal with Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's going from, CNBC of having a 15-minute or 15-second clip to let's unpack, my platform. This is an apolitical podcast. We're not like talking about politics. This is just an example. I can unpack these ideas and really suss out the thinking, the why, that meta commentary around this is my thought process. Because it's kind of like the difference between, teaching someone to fish versus just giving them a fish for the day. So
Definitely.
I'm literally working this kind of like thought process out in real time. So feel free to jump in and disagree, or, comment or add anything.
Yeah, sometimes it does just take talking it out. Like I said, I'd never written anything down or thought about what makes a good online course. I've kind of had little observations as I'm working and,
Right.
thinking about this is good, this is bad, but never really going through, the root cause analysis of like, what makes this good? What makes this bad? So yeah, I definitely see an element to that. And when it comes to a data analytics portfolio, again, like being able to show that, you can kind of get inside the mind, and that you're going to be easy to teach. Like that's a big thing. It's a steep learning curve. It's a very knowledge intensive kind of profession. So you want to show
Mhm.
that, you're going to be easy to teach, and you're going to show that like, hey, I can work online. And, and I even think with like, talk about working with, that's a big part of data analytics too, right? Explaining things to clients, working with
Right.
customers, all that kind of stuff. Honest to God, you look at things on like YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever, where I've gone through comments, you go to my blog, I've had comments that thread, like, a couple dozen threads where somebody's asking me like, well, how can I do this? I go through it. I mean, I'm open sourcing my process of like, how do I work with clients? How do I make sure that they get what they need when they don't know what they need, or they can't really explain it themselves? So I think it's a great source, all this stuff with the blog or a YouTube channel or whatever. When you're an employer, look at that stuff. Look at somebody's YouTube channel and just see like, how do they work through this? I mean, that really gives you a sense that like, A, they actually care about what they're doing, because they're not making any money with their YouTube channel probably when they're starting out. They're just
Right.
doing this to help people and have fun. So if they're showing that much heart and effort and fun when it's not even related to their job, like, hey, this might be somebody who, might do something. So I think that's just, something that is good for employers to think about. And for data
Yeah.
analyst perspectives to think like, oh yeah, I can show like, hey, I can work with clients. I can explain things through online.
I mean, you bring up a really fascinating point of, if you can show an employer that you are a data nerd or you're passionate about what you're doing, I was listening to a podcast by Naval Ravikant, who is I don't know if
Uh-huh.
you ever did you
Heard
listen
the
to
name. I've not heard
so
the
so
episode.
he maybe it was last year, he had this big tweet storm about like how to build wealth from his perspective as a Silicon angel investor. And he was in part of the podcast, like he turned those series of tweets into a podcast where he like elaborated and expounded upon his ideas. He was talking about building a team and how when he was younger, he used to try to sell people to come onto his team. But now, like the way that he approaches building out teams is that he needs to find someone who is not only uniquely suited to delivering on that, but they're passionately engaged with that. Because the difference between someone who is, in the wrong job and they're just phoning it in, just putting enough effort in to just not get fired, versus someone who is passionate, like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to spend time, not only on campus during work hours, but also I may go to a, what is it, a data boot camp, or what do they call those? Oh man, I'm blanking on it right now. Fabio talked about it in his interview. Um, a hackathon,
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
I'm like, I'm going, and it's like, and this is a place I find myself within my own business, is my social life and my business life. There's definitely crossroads like that Greater Than the Sum event that I went to last night. I had fun, but I also built, my network and met potential students and potential business partners, clients, like that kind of crossroad where it's like, you're almost in this semi-retired state because you love what you're doing so much. Like the return on this person who is passionately engaged versus this person who's just phoning it in it's an exponential difference. And I think managers are kind of aware of this at this point in time. Fabio talked about that quite a bit, about how if you can show that you go to hackathons, or that you're using analytics to study your own financial data, then that is really, really impressive to him, because then he has faith that you're not only going to stick around, but you're going to level up your skills as the years go on.
Definitely.
Sorry, I feel like that was a whole rant diatribe.
Yeah.
That's kind of making me think of a follow-up question that's not really on our content schedule, but how would you advise, this is a question that a student had for me last night, how would you advise someone trying to keep up with analytics trends?
Ooh.
See, I didn't have a good answer for him either.
Yeah. Well, I think again, it
Like,
kind of
is there
goes.
a resource? Like, I feel like I'm kind of on the cutting edge in a few spaces, like the Tableau, Salesforce, Einstein. That's kind of like brand new, breaking new ground, and I'm kind of on the ground floor of that. But that's just one opportunity. Like, there's a bunch of different, like the data section or the cross section of like machine learning and data visualization, which was something I saw on, I think, like MSNBC was talking about.
Yeah. Well, there's so many, right? So I think you just have to be cool with yourself that you're not going to be an expert in everything, and don't even try too hard to be too tactical and thinking like, oh, hey, I'm going to learn Julia because that's going to take over everything. Julia is this like
I haven't even heard of
nascent,
that.
it's like this nascent data science programming language that MIT people came up with. And,
Oh,
like it's kind of got this like cult following. So you might think like, hey, Julia is going to take over and I should learn it now. And like, just, okay. Like if you go and learn a little bit of Julia and you really, really like it, cool, go with it. Like I'll admit Power BI, I don't know that much about Power BI. I know friends who, when it first came out, were like, let me try it out. Hey, I love this. I'm hitching my wagon to Power BI. And they've done really, really well as it's grown. Like there's been a huge demand, and like and I thought like, dang, I should have got in on that ground floor with Power BI. It's okay. You can't learn everything. So just like find a couple that you like. Again, going to this idea of thinking like deductively about the data analytics stack. And, I still think spreadsheets are something that you should know about, know a little bit about databases, know a little bit about, dashboard, BI tools, know something about, a data science scripting language. Just pick one of them that
Yeah.
you like get good at those. And there are all these other ones. So it's kind of like a T-shaped approach. And in terms of resources for keeping abreast of these trends, I think that LinkedIn is just really good for that. You start to, I feel like I have my little corner of the data analytics universe, and I have my people that I go to. I've got my, it's like Pawn Stars. He's got his autograph guy and his card
Chumley.
guy. Yeah, it's like I've got my Power BI guy and my SQL
Yeah.
guy and that. So I just follow them for my stuff. Yeah.
So, to give you context of this conversation, one of my strategic partners is Fungi Marketing, and I was talking to this student who is wanting to get into he's got a marketing company that he's working for and is curious about getting deeper into marketing analytics. But one of the things that you have to be on top of the changes on Google Analytics, on
Mm.
Facebook ads. I mean, that's a major part of what Ryan Forrest is, who's my business partner. He has to stay on top of these trends, because if something changes in the algorithm, like for example, one of his clients recently, they were leaning, this wasn't his fault. Like, he advised them against putting all their eggs in one basket, but they were leaning solely on search engine optimization to get leads. Then the algorithm shifted, and then their search SEO just kind of tanked. So all of a sudden, this like $10 million company has no leads coming through the door. And I think that the analytics space doesn't change that rapidly. Like Excel, I don't think that there's, if you can learn the basic bones and structure of Excel, I don't think that's going to be changing in the near 5 to 10 years. That may be a controversial statement. Would you agree?
Um, Yeah, even with Excel, there's just so many the functions. I mean, there's this whole X lookup thing that just dropped yesterday to a lot of, like, I just got X lookup yesterday. I've seen people using it. It's supposed to be the VLOOKUP killer. So if you know Excel, that's kind of one of those legendary functions. There's all these new functions. I mean, Power Query, there's so many things. It's just even with Excel, there's just, but yeah, you have to learn the basics anyway. So if you get that, it'll be a good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, yeah, there's just so many of these tools and technologies now that it's just not realistic for you to know all of them. But if you can kind of have that T-shaped approach, I mean, I've never been somebody who is going to be all in with, Excel or Tableau or whatever, and like that's all I
What do
do.
you mean T-shape? So it's like, have like inch deep knowledge of all the technologies, but you have one space where you're really deep.
Yeah, I would say like, two or three. And again, kind of going with this idea of, knowing a little bit about spreadsheets, dashboards, databases, and scripting, data science. Like if you can kind of pick one of those, like me in particular, I like Excel. I know that there are some Google Sheets people out there. I just really prefer Excel. So I picked that. Databases, I mean, SQL's kind of your only option there. I guess if you got more advanced, you could pick you could be a
Mhm.
Postgres person or a SQL server, but for a beginner, it doesn't really matter. For dashboards, I guess I would say Tableau, just because I haven't really even gotten into Power BI yet. But whatever, I can see some benefits because I like Excel. Um, and then I like R, for data scripting. I just, Python to me, it always seems a little forced because it's more of like a general purpose programming language. I mean, R was built for stats, and I know a lot of really purist computer science people don't like it because of that. Like it breaks some rules, and it's just not, from a theoretical perspective, Python's a better language. But I think for the purpose of stats, like I like R. So those are kind of like what I focus on.
Okay.
Yeah, and then all these other tools, like learn a little bit about that you can kind of understand like what people are doing with them. But yeah, and then as far as like keeping up on these trends, again, like I just kind of think once you get piped into the LinkedIn world, you're going to start seeing the names, and they're going to be plugged in to these changes in the technologies. So yeah.
Right. Like Tableau comes out with like 3 new versions. Like, so I think Tableau 2020.1 just came out, and I think it's more for marketing purposes so that they have like a press release 3 times a year to, like, I don't know, I guess it's good for marketing. I don't really pay attention to those. I should, I guess, I don't know. I guess that's debatable. Should is a strong word. I'm not a Tableau specialist. Like, that's where I started. I started being all things Tableau, but now I've kind of gotten into just being an analytics expert. So Tableau is part of what I'm doing, but I'm not going to prioritize Tableau to take up 80% of my like learning time. If for me, I think it's a better use of my time to learn, take on new clients and like learn new business use cases. And like, it's really fascinating. There's been a power dynamic shift in how I'm approaching my clients and how like we're interfacing with each other. It used to be very much they would have a specific problem, be like, "Oh, we need help," and then they would reach out to me. Now, I've made somewhat of a name for myself, which is not very hard to do in Greensboro. I think there's maybe one other analytics consulting shop in town, and I'm now having meetings with like C-suite executives who they know analytics, but I'm coming in and I'm actually like prescribing, like, here's my approach. We start with data governance, figure out the issues there, then we help you define your KPIs and that support these initiatives you have, and then let's build out some infrastructure. So it's been a shift from like I'm now telling them what they should do, and it's pretty interesting because now I'm getting, instead of having this one project for this organization where I come in and solve it, like for example, this client that I worked for the last 3 months of last year, I went through that process, and then they realized we want this same process for all 5 of our departments now. So now I'm learning about survey analytics, about product design, about their actual operations. And this is the first time I've kind of gotten that, what does Tableau like to say, a 360-degree view of the data, but like we're, instead of just one department that I'm building out the infrastructure for, it's the entire organization. So that's where, I like to spend my time learning. Is I'll have a project come to me and then I'll research it, but I'm not focusing on the finer details of each individual tool. I mean, that could be just, my my opinion on that. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Do you have any like closing notes? Anything to plug, maybe?
Oh yes, I will mention my site. So again, I really focus on helping people teach and learn data analytics and kind of taking this long view of what it means to be data literate. So to that end, I will be rolling out a resource library. It's going to be at my business, stringfestanalytics.com. And this will be a place for you to find what does it mean to be intermediate at Excel. If you are going to teach a workshop on Excel, what are the learning objectives? What are the things that you can assess that knowledge? What are some activities that you can do? Things like that. So, really building out what it would look like to kind of have I kind of like this idea of the data analytics boot camp. I've been involved with that idea for a while, and looking at what would that look like inside of your organization? Like if you were going to have a data analytics boot camp, how would you build that? This is going to try to really open source that process as much as possible. So that'll be at
Yeah,
stringfestanalytics.com.
we actually had Billy Zhao, who is a TA with UT Austin's boot camp, and we talked about the differences between being self-taught versus a boot camp versus a university degree.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good topic.
Yeah, I was about to say. Well, I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts on that because so you're saying that you're kind of fitting into that boot camp space.
Yeah, so I have been pretty involved in developing a data analytics bootcamp for a while now, and I really like the idea. There are places for a university education. People. That's a question that I probably get asked the most, or at least very highly, is like, how do I learn? Should I go to school to learn data analytics, or should I do a boot camp? Should I self-teach? Um, yeah. Do you want me to go into that?
Yeah, please go into it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I like to say that there are two jobs that we all have. Uh, there's one job that is what you're doing now. So just being competent in the roles and responsibilities that you have the present day. And then there's kind of thinking about like, well, how's this going to change in the future? What's this job going to look like in 10 years? Will this job even exist? And how can I kind of like put myself out of a job based on what I'm going to see with those trends? So I really think, there's nothing better than a data boot camp, I think, for just getting your butt in that chair as a data analyst. Because, like I've seen it myself, I went to a 4-year degree program. I wasn't ready, and this was a while ago. And their schools, I went to a liberal arts school, right? So it's not like they were bragging on their, career readiness, really.
Right.
But still, I wasn't ready. But I look at this data analytics boot camp, and I'm like, people are getting good jobs. They're prepared. They really have the mindset. So I think that idea of like a really concentrated, very practical transition to becoming a data analyst, I'm a big proponent of the idea. So like, does that mean that we should put these schools out of business? Like, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe the higher education market is a little bloated and saturated, but I don't know that they even should be competing with the coding boot camps, because higher education moves slowly. That's just the way it is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an old institution. It's not going to be able to keep up with the market. It's old and it's slow. I think they need to say, this is a good thing that we're slow. Like I think there's some book on that, like the
You think
benefits of
so?
being,
Well,
yeah,
it's funny because I'm getting into that higher education space now because I'm going to be teaching data visualization in the capstone course at Greensboro College starting in the fall. And I don't know. That's something I'm struggling with too. Is that well, not struggling with. I'm worried that I'm going to be such a like curveball for these students because I'm going to be partnering them with organizations out in the real world, and if these students, they're undergraduates, have never had an internship, it may be a little jarring. Um, because I'm actually going to be using my LinkedIn courses to teach them about Power BI and Tableau. So not only are they going to like learn about it, they're going to have that like badge on LinkedIn, and then they're going to have real world experience. So not only are they going to have like an actual use case with a business, but then they're going to be somewhat credentialed outside of the university, which I think is um, it is interesting because those online courses can move really fast. I mean, I went out to Santa Barbara to record for LinkedIn. I think I was there for 5 days in studio, as opposed to, I mean, what are these semesters? 3 months long? Like
yeah.
and the courses aren't super long.
Well, I think that's one. So the ways that college could compete with data analytics, I would say, the first that I was kind of getting into is this idea of helping people really give them the critical skills to teach themselves out of their current jobs. So, colleges are old and slow. You are going to learn critical thinking. You are going to learn how to write and communicate in a way that you're just not going to in a 6-month boot camp. I mean, you're getting technical topics thrown at you for 3 to 6 months. You're not really going to start to get that wisdom and the context to be able to teach yourself new things, to kind of use these principles to think about, like how is the future going to look based on like what I'm seeing now. So to get that context and that wisdom and perspective, okay, I think a liberal arts or any college degree is going to help with that. And then again, going to this idea like of community or college, I mean, that's what college means. It's like coming together of people. So you to get
Yeah.
that networking and to really build that community, you're not going to get that at a coding boot camp per se. I mean, it does a much better job than like when I just looked at the whole space. When I didn't have any knowledge, I just thought like, oh, I don't know, how would that work? I think it works really, really well. I mean, it's really blown my perspectives and made me think like this is a very cool and potentially disruptive force in higher education. And I think the way that schools need to respond is by admitting that, like, what is it? You can't Amazon or whatever. It's the same way.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can't out boot camp a boot camp. So you have to think about, what are the ways? And I think again, like that teaching critical thinking and also, building that community and doing things like that, like what you're doing are probably the ways that you're going to teach or compete as a school, like a higher education school for data.
Yeah, I think it's really a struggle for universities to teach tactical skills because they rapidly change to where it's almost like um, a speedboat is a boot camp and an ocean liner is a university. Like these boot camps can just weave in and out and be on top of the trends because they're a much smaller and more nimble organization.
Yeah.
So where, yeah, you're right. I think the universities have just gotten bloated. Like there's so much bureaucracy, so much, what are they called? It's not admissions, but not the actual teachers, but the support faculty,
Administrators.
administrators. Like that
Yeah.
seems just ridiculous to me. I'm very biased here. I got my undergrad degree in economics and I completely squandered that. Now that was my fault. But at the same time, a part of me feels like it's a little bit of a predatory practice of, hey, you're 18. Here, let's take out $40,000 worth of debt. And it's like, I, I'm, I wasn't really an adult at that point. You know, I should have probably gone and worked for a while. That being said, when I went back to get my master's degree, I had worked in a job that I hated for 3 years. So I took on 3 internships. I like really applied myself because I knew it was at stake. Like I was just kind of like lethargically going through my undergraduate degree, just like that example from earlier in the podcast of like someone who's just phoning it in versus someone who's like all about it, super passionate, plugged into it. That was the difference between my undergrad and my master's degree. Which, yeah, I mean, that's like a whole conversation into itself.
Yeah.
You seem more pro university though, which I mean, I welcome the different opinion. I need someone to balance my ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm I'm definitely bearish on higher education in general. There are probably too many of them. And I'm really more focusing on like the data analytics space.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, from what I've seen with, this is pretty much what I do full time is develop training and curriculum. And the vast majority of it is online, through institutions where people pretty much self-learn, or it's a non-traditional format like a boot camp. But I work with a couple of higher education institutions as well. And I think that they understand that the strategy needs to be like, we're not going to out boot camp these boot camps. So we need to have a little different of a take on teaching data analytics. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but I think once you can start informing people that like these boot camps and these places online to learn, like they're pretty legit for if you just need a job and you just want to get started and you just want to, if you want to get your union card as a data analyst, like they're pretty good and the placement is good. I mean, some of them have like job guarantees, to you don't pay anything until you get a job, and all sorts of things. I mean, they're legit. So I think they're definitely a force to be reckoned with, and something to consider seriously if you're interested in data analytics, because I think I would have benefited from that when I was at the place where I was. They weren't really even around back then, though, so I can't feel too bad
Right,
about
they're very new
myself.
thing for sure. Well, George, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a fantastic conversation. I mean, I learned so much each time I get one of these podcasts. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've been perusing them myself, and they are really great. So I'm glad to be a part of the lineup now, John David.
Oh, thanks. Oh.